We've been lucky enough to get Alex Ross working on the collector's edition cover of Mortal Kombat vs. DC Universe. Alex Ross is a very famous and very talented comic book artist who happens to be friends with a few members of the Mortal Kombat team. He went to school with them. And so we've always wanted to work with him, and finally we get a chance right now.
I am a comic book fan made good who got a chance to work in the field that I desired to since I was probably 3 years old. I've been working in comics as a painter, which I was trained to be at the American Academy of Art in Chicago. And the comics that I've done since I was 19 have been all painted illustration, and that's kind of my gimmick within the art form. And I still use actual paints on actual paper and airbrush and everything mixed in. My collaboration with Midway began with first hearing about the game from the guys working on it many months ago, and knowing it was a big secret at what was going to be accomplished. And at that time I had no idea that I could have anything to do with it, and I was always looking for a way that I could help them develop the character designs and costumes in whatever way that they were beginning work on it. And fortunately they came up with the idea all on their own to use me for this collector's edition box cover art. I've known much of the team for Mortal Kombat since I was a teenager. Going back 20 years ago, I met Tony Goski, John Vogel, John Tobias.
And it's funny, we actually went to art school together, and we're actually pretty good friends. We went to art school, we graduated around the same time at the American Academy of Art. So it's cool, we're finally working on the same project together, you know. So, I mean, we've known each other for all these years, and I'm doing video games, he's always doing comics. Now they're kind of coming together, so it's pretty cool.
I knew about their first foray into working with computer games when they first got into the working field. I went into the field of advertising and ultimately comics, and they went pure digital, and I was always amazed with the developments that were happening in that field, and always impressed by the work that I was seeing these guys do. The invention of the Mortal Kombat game and characters is something that I feel particularly close to because of it speaks to me as a comic reader and creator, that I enjoy the kind of comic stylings of these boldly colorful characters. It's very much in keeping with the same way I approach designing characters as well. In contrast to the way the guys work in developing the game, I'm still using very old traditional tools of drawing on paper, painting on paper, and my most elaborate trick is the use of an airbrush. That's about as modern as I get. In many ways, what I do is similar to the way they used to work when they first started the game, where they were using live models wearing costumes. I came by to photograph a couple of the guys here as models for a couple of the characters on the MK side of things, just to get a sense of what that could add to the life of the game. I made a special point of getting the original model for Raiden to pose for me, since he works here anyways on the game. I thought that would be a cool thing. Given the number of years I've been working in comics, I've built up a lot of these things as being very special to my way of working, to get as photographic and as realistic as possible. And then I'll draw from that initial reference based upon my original sketch, which the original sketch I did is extremely tight, and I follow that as closely as possible. Then going into the painted stage, it's almost like I've got a picture in my mind where I know exactly what it should turn out like, and I'm comfortable now with where it's going to go. But generally, once shade and color are being applied, anything can happen. I did an entirely tonal painting in gray tones for the entire piece before putting in any aspect of color, to get all the rendering in, so that in a way the color stage is a final touch-up stage, and much of the hard work was just purely light and shadow. And I used an effect that I often, a little trick I use with sometimes space backgrounds, creating nebulas, where I've got this number of strings that are tied together that basically I hold over the piece, airbrush around my hand, catching a little bit of those strings, and then the leftover impression is something that looks like this beautiful soft fade kind of nebula. That on top of that I was spraying additional layers of harmonious color to pick up on whatever other light sources or commanding color that the scene seemed to implicate. Like I put in a lot of golden color from one light source, and then of course there was Green Lantern's ring, which is casting off this bright green glow, and then I'm using anything from just airbrushing straight onto the piece with a general glow to putting on pieces of paper to create a sort of ray effect that's coming off of the ring. It starts to get, in some ways, kind of technical as far as the effect of what that can look like, but I try and use the airbrush sparingly so it doesn't really overwhelm or completely take away from the human hand side of things. And that's hopefully what I'm completing at the end, is something that feels like it was the process of an organic gestation, something that feels very natural and real. And I was very pleased with the result of the final piece. I think it's a pretty decent painting for me, one of the best I've done in a while. It was fun to work with the friends of mine who've been working on Mortal Kombat for so many years, and to work with these characters that they've put a lot of time and attention to, and to try and respond to the things that they've done physically with both the DC and the MK characters, trying to incorporate much of their recent work to put their mark on both of these things. It's cool to have watched on the sidelines what these guys have been doing for so many years, and to have a chance to finally work with them in this capacity. I admire their work. I think that Mortal Kombat's a very cool game, and it's even cooler that I have some pride towards the people who I grew up with, who've invented and still create this game every couple of years, create a new one. I've known John Tobias since I was 18. When I first met or saw him at art school, he was the guy who was already doing what I wanted to do.
For Mortal Kombat versus DC Universe, I'm illustrating the Collector's Edition comic book. And that came about when Ed Boon actually gave me a call and asked me if I'd be interested, and my answer was yes.
We've kept in contact with John over the years, and we have lunch every once in a while and stuff. But we haven't worked with him in over 9 years. So we were excited over the prospect of having John do our comic book. John has a great reputation with Mortal Kombat. He hasn't worked on a Mortal Kombat game in quite a while, so the timing just seemed perfect. It seemed like something that was destined to happen in my eyes.
When I was approached about doing the comic book, I had a lot of ideas, obviously. Thinking about all the different characters and how they could potentially relate to each other was fun. For this particular comic, the MK guys were interested in seeing all of the characters represented in some way in the book, and so it took a lot of back and forth to try to squeeze everybody in there. This sort of started out, as anything does, with a conversation about what direction we wanted to go. And I spoke with John Vogel on a number of occasions about what he wanted to do with the story.
Having John back in some form in the Mortal Kombat world is awesome. I'm glad he's doing this comic book. When we did the first Mortal Kombat, we made a comic book as well. John drew it, he wrote and drew the comic book. I colored some of it, he colored some of it. John Tobias created everything that I've been working on for the past, 10, 15 years. And for him to come back and then, see what I've done and go, okay, yeah, that's cool, and that's an interesting way to go, and to collaborate with him again is really, it's amazing. It's a nice feeling.
I haven't touched Mortal Kombat in a long time, and so having an opportunity to sort of revisit the characters was very exciting for me. Drawing them came naturally. I mean, the moment that I started sketching the interior of the Collector's Edition comic book, everything just sort of came right out. It felt like I was at home. Being able to draw the Mortal Kombat characters along with the DC characters, for me, has been a dream come true. It's something that I would never have envisioned happening when we created this series, back in the early 90s. And so being able to participate has been a lot of fun, and I enjoyed working with the guys again on the product. And like I say, it has been very enjoyable, and I think I'm very happy with the end result.